Warning, this review will contain lots and lots of gory violence and horror, so please switch off if you don't fancy that. Hello everyone, and on Sunday the 16th of July, I found out that George A. Romero had died. George A. Romero was one of my four big inspirations, with Wes Craven, may he also rest in peace, Sam Raimi, and Eli Roth. George A. Romero's films really started the whole zombie thing, like them feasting on flesh and stumbling down the streets. They weren't really presented in film like this before Night of the Living Dead. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to review the entire Trilogy of the Dead. The Trilogy of the Dead were some of the first horror films that I ever watched, and they really inspired me to make loads of zombie films. They weren't very good at all. Let's just enjoy, the films that George A. Romero created. Let's begin with Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead was directed by George A. Romero, of course, and screenplay by John Russo and George Romero. The cast was mainly George Romero's friends, so the film has a very independent feel because of its low budget, and that's why it's quite celebrated, because it's a really well made film, just for such a little production. Night of the Living Dead. We start the film with brother and sister, Johnny and Barbara, going to visit a relative's grave. Johnny starts to make fun of Barbara because Barbara used to be scared when she was a little kid of the graveyard. We get this classic line.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Johnny then points out a man walking down the graveyard and says it's like some kind of creepy guy. It turns out that the guy's actually a zombie. Barbara runs away and then goes to a farmhouse where we then meet Ben. We then find out that a zombie outbreak has taken place. We then meet other survivors, and then the zombies surround the house. So yeah, that's the main story. The whole film's just set in this farmhouse. It really gives it a nice claustrophobic feel. There's lots of scenes with characters arguing, and it just adds more tension to the film. Judith O'Dea plays Barbara. Juwan Jones plays Ben. Marilyn Eastman plays Helen. Carl Hardman plays Harry. Keith Wayne plays Tom, and Judith Riley plays Judy. Helen and Harry have a daughter who's been attacked by one of the zombies, and they keep her in the cellar. There's also some tension between Ben and Harry because, Harry believes that everyone should just stay in the cellar, and Ben believes if they go in the cellar when the zombies swarm in, there's absolutely no escape. Towards the end of the film, it gets quite violent when Tom and Judy die, and Harry and Helen get killed by their zombified daughter. I'm not going to spoil the very end just in case some of you want to see it, but I'd highly recommend Night of the Living Dead. Also, Bill Hinzman's zombie is very iconic as a zombie character. But anyway, let's move on to Dawn of the Dead. In 1978's Dawn of the Dead, the zombie apocalypse is rapidly spreading. We follow Peter, Stephen, Fran and Roger. They escape from the chaos the city has become. They come across a shopping mall filled with zombies. They find an abandoned part of the mall and take shelter there. They try and build a new life while being surrounded by the flesh-hungry creatures. There can be friction between these characters, but overall they genuinely care about each other, and in my opinion they are some of the greatest characters in horror movie history. Later on in the film, a motorbike gang led by the amazing effects artist Tom Savini raid the mall, letting many zombies in, leading to extreme violence. This is why I think Dawn of the Dead is great. It has lots of human-on-human violence, and it just shows the chaos that would happen in a zombie apocalypse. Overall, the film has great special effects, a great soundtrack by Goblin, and it's just well directed and well acted in my opinion. And it's probably my favourite zombie film of all time, and it's definitely in my top 5 horror films. And many zombie fans are a big fan of it, and many horror fans are. So if you haven't seen it and you're a fan of zombies, then I'd highly recommend, because in my opinion it's just amazing. So next up we have Day of the Dead. So Day of the Dead takes place in an underground shelter where the survivors of the zombie apocalypse hide out. This group is led by Captain Rhodes, a demanding soldier. We then meet Frankenstein. At least that's what everyone calls him. He's a scientist trying to prove that there's still emotion and memory in a zombie. He proves this with Bub, which is probably one of the greatest zombies of all time. Later on, there's friction between the scientists and soldiers, and all hell breaks loose when the zombies are let in. We then get the amazing death of Captain Rhodes, and the effects were done by Tom Savini. And in my opinion, this Day of the Dead has the best effects in the trilogy. It also had help. The effects had help with K&B, well, the future K&B effects, who now do the effects on The Walking Dead. To be honest, I'm quite a big fan of Day of the Dead. Yeah, it's quite good. I'm not sure, it's not as good as Dawn of the Dead in my opinion, but it's got strong characters and it's well directed. So I'd recommend Day of the Dead because, you know, it's just a fun 80s zombie film. So that was the Trilogy of the Dead. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest horror trilogies or horror series ever made. So may George Romero rest in peace. Your work will always be remembered. Night of the Living Dead. I've just reviewed this. Who's giving me this? Better bob it on them.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
The lid off the coffin so I can see his face. I swore I'd see him dead, and I will see him and make sure. I don't harbor any fears. It's not really him down in that box.